Daniel was 27 years old, but his life felt older, worn down by repetition and quiet disappointment. Days passed without shape or urgency. Morning alarms were ignored, afternoons disappeared into endless scrolling, and nights ended with the same heavy feeling in his chest. He wasn't lazy, at least not in the way people usually meant it. His dreams still existed, but they felt distant, like memories from someone else's life. He remembered a time when he believed he would become something meaningful. Back then, the future felt open and generous. Now it felt like a wall slowly closing in. Friends were moving forward, careers, families, progress, while Daniel remained in the same place, telling himself that his time would come. He had reasons ready whenever doubt appeared. The economy was bad. Opportunities were limited. Life had been unfair to him. Some of those reasons were true, but the truth he avoided was simpler and more painful. He had stopped pushing himself. Every day followed the same pattern. He waited to feel motivated before acting, but motivation never arrived. He waited for confidence before starting, but confidence never came. So he waited, and waiting slowly became his identity. At night, when the world grew quiet, his thoughts became louder. Regret crept in, followed by fear. Fear of trying and failing. Fear of trying and succeeding, only to realize he had wasted too much time already. One evening, after another unproductive day, a power outage plunged his room into darkness. His phone battery was dead. There were no distractions left, just silence. In that stillness, an uncomfortable thought surfaced: what if his future self could see him right now? Not the version of himself he imagined one day becoming, but the version he was actively creating through his inaction. He pictured it clearly, an older version of himself, carrying the weight of missed chances, standing quietly and watching him choose comfort over effort, watching him trade hours of his life for nothing, watching him delay his own potential. That image hurt more than any criticism he had ever received from others, because this time, there was no one else to blame. For the first time, Daniel felt a sense of responsibility that cut through his excuses. He realized something unsettling. No one was coming to save him. No moment of sudden inspiration was waiting around the corner. If his life was going to change, it would be because he chose discomfort today instead of regret tomorrow. He didn't feel motivated. He didn't feel confident. He felt afraid, but he also felt aware. Awareness that every small decision was shaping the person he would become. Awareness that time was moving forward whether he did or not. Sitting in the dark, he understood that the future he feared was being built by the choices he was making now. That night, he didn't make grand promises or dramatic declarations. He did something smaller, quieter, but far more important. He stood up. He picked up a pen. He wrote down one simple task, something he had been avoiding for months, not because he felt ready, but because he was tired of running from himself. As he began, awkward and unsure, something shifted inside him. The fear didn't disappear, but it lost its power. For the first time in a long while, Daniel wasn't waiting for his life to begin. He was taking the first imperfect step toward it, knowing that somewhere ahead, his future self was watching and hoping he wouldn't stop. The next days did not feel heroic. They felt heavy. Daniel woke up earlier than his body wanted to, his mind immediately searching for reasons to stay in bed. The old voice returned, reminding him how uncomfortable effort was, how familiar failure felt, how easy it would be to quit and tell himself he would start again tomorrow. Some mornings, that voice almost won. But the memory of that quiet night, of realizing no one else was responsible for his future, pushed him out of bed even when motivation was nowhere to be found. He quickly learned that change was not dramatic. There were no sudden breakthroughs, no applause, no visible results to prove he was moving forward. Progress felt invisible, almost imaginary. He worked in silence, practicing, studying, improving piece by piece. Many times, he questioned whether it was worth it. The world did not seem to care that he was trying now. Nothing around him had changed, and that made the effort feel pointless. Failure became part of his routine. Some days he slipped back into old habits, losing hours to distraction and self-doubt. The difference was that he no longer pretended those moments didn't matter. Instead of giving up completely, he noticed the pattern and returned to the work. That small decision to come back instead of quitting slowly reshaped how he saw himself. Discipline, he realized, was not about punishment. It was about respect. Respect for the person he could become if he stopped betraying his own intentions. He stopped waiting to feel confident and acted while feeling uncertain. He stopped waiting for clarity and moved forward with imperfect plans. Each completed task, no matter how small, became proof that he was capable of keeping a promise to himself. There were days when exhaustion took over, when the distance between where he was and where he wanted to be felt unbearable. On those days, Daniel returned to the image that had started everything, his future self, watching silently, not angry, not disappointed, just observing, waiting to see whether today would be another excuse added to the past or another step added to the foundation of his future. That image changed how he responded to pain. He stopped asking why things were so hard and started asking whether the struggle was shaping him. He understood that growth was not supposed to feel comfortable. The discomfort meant something was changing. Slowly, his mindset shifted from avoiding difficulty to accepting it as the price of progress. As weeks turned into months, something unexpected happened. His confidence began to grow, not because life became easier, but because he became stronger. He trusted himself more. He knew he could show up even when he didn't feel like it. He knew he could recover from bad days instead of letting them define him. That trust became more valuable than any external validation. The war he was fighting was no longer against circumstances. It was against the version of himself that preferred safety over growth. Every morning became a decision. Every action became a vote for the person he was becoming. He realized that motivation followed action, not the other way around. And once he understood that, excuses lost their grip. Daniel was still far from his goals, but he was no longer stuck. The path ahead was demanding, uncertain, and lonely at times. Yet for the first time, he felt aligned with himself. He wasn't running from his future anymore. He was building it, one disciplined choice at a time, aware that every effort, seen or unseen, was shaping the life that was quietly taking form ahead of him. Time passed, not in dramatic leaps, but in steady, demanding days that required Daniel to show up whether he felt ready or not. The habits he once forced himself to follow slowly became part of who he was. Effort no longer felt foreign. It felt expected. He no longer asked himself if he should work. He asked how well he would work today. That shift changed everything. His life was still imperfect, but it was no longer directionless. He had learned skills that once intimidated him. He had faced rejection, mistakes, and long stretches of uncertainty without running away. Each setback taught him something valuable, that failure was not proof of weakness, but evidence of movement. The fear that once controlled his choices had lost its authority because he had survived it too many times to believe it was fatal. One quiet evening, Daniel sat alone again, much like he had years earlier. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy, it was calm. He looked back at the version of himself who had waited for motivation, who believed life would change without effort, who hid behind excuses that sounded reasonable but led nowhere. That version felt distant now, almost unfamiliar. He thought again about his future self, the image that had once haunted him. This time, the feeling was not fear, but understanding. He realized that his future had been shaped not by one big decision, but by hundreds of small ones made when no one was watching. The early mornings, the days he showed up tired, the moments he chose responsibility over comfort, those choices had quietly rewritten his story. Daniel understood something deeper now. Growth was not about becoming someone else. It was about returning to the person he had always known he could be. The discipline he once resisted had given him freedom. Freedom from regret, freedom from self-doubt, freedom from the endless cycle of starting over. He had learned to trust time and effort, not blindly, but honestly. He knew progress could not be rushed, but it could be guaranteed through consistency. That knowledge gave him peace. He no longer measured his life by comparison to others. He measured it by alignment with his values and the integrity of his actions. There were still challenges ahead, bigger goals, higher expectations, moments of uncertainty that would test him again. But he no longer feared those moments. He welcomed them. They were signs that he was still growing, still moving forward, still choosing action. As he prepared for the next phase of his life, Daniel felt a quiet sense of pride. Not the loud pride of achievement, but the steady pride of becoming reliable to himself. He had become someone who acted even when the outcome was uncertain. Someone who understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move despite it. He stood by a window, watching the city lights stretch into the distance, each one representing a life in motion. Somewhere ahead, his future continued to unfold. And for the first time, he knew that the version of himself waiting there would not be filled with regret, because the future had been watching all along, watching his choices, watching his discipline, watching his growth. And now, instead of looking back in disappointment, it was ready to meet him with respect.